दीप जले और जागा ये मन, दीप जले और जागा ये मन, मोरा जो बनाना वेला।
पुरुष जब स्त्री के बारे में लिखता है तो अनुमान से लिखता है, स्त्री जब स्त्री के बारे में लिखती है तो अनुभव से लिखती है। ये अनुभव और अनुमान का फर्क हमेशा रहेगा।
It has meant deep consolation, knowing that someone has been here before. Just knowing that this particular experience or psychological or cultural condition that I'm experiencing now has happened before.
Whereas, there was any number of histories of the left movement, peasant movement, such like, nobody had thought of the women's movement. I was working in publishing at the time, and I tried to talk to my bosses, who were all very nice people, ask them why we don't do books by women, and they didn't even think that there was anything there to write about.
For a man, his wife is someone who is not going to leave very easily, especially if she doesn't wander off into jungle parks or read the wrong literature.
If you don't understand how women have lived and how they reflect upon their lives, how will you make policies for women? How will you understand what they need in the contemporary society?
लगाए जतियाँ, हाँ 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 हाँ, मोरा जो बनाना वेलरा, माई मोरा जो बनाना वेलरा, माई।
The first mention of women per se in any capacity to be regarded as literate appears in the Rig Veda, when they mention there are 10 verses dedicated to a lady called Maitreyi, who is the wife of the sage Yajnavalkya. And there is also Gargi, who is celebrated as a very well-established philosopher. The first women's anthology is actually attributed to Buddhist monks in between the late 6th century, early 7th century. And by the time Buddha makes his appearance in 623, you've had a lot of women who come into the fold of Buddha Sanghas because they offered freedom.
One of the early texts that we have is the verses composed by Bhikkhu monks and by Bhikkhuni nuns, and they're called Theragatha and Therigatha. They are modelled on the similar pattern, that is, the men's verses are codified under Theragatha and the women's voices are codified under this text called Therigatha. Now, if you make a comparison, you'll actually see that the things that men talk about are very different from the things that women talk about in their verses. So, what women seem to talk about is quite a lot based on experiences and experiences of all kinds, including this search for the higher self. There is this very interesting account in which the tempter Mara comes to a woman who's seated under a tree, and is a bhikkhuni who's seated under a tree, and she's meditating. And this guy says to her, "What are you doing sitting under this tree and meditating? All you need is two-finger consciousness." And what is two-finger consciousness? It's the ability to put your hand in a pot of rice that is cooking, take out the rice and test whether it's cooked or not. So it's called two-finger. It's been translated as two-finger consciousness. And she responds back saying, "What do I want to do with two-finger consciousness? I seek Okasha, space, the skies, what you might describe as the extended self."
बुद्धि भला कति कान छुटी, हाय रे हाय बुद्धि भला कति कान छुटी हाय रे हाय बुद्धि भला कति कान
The first works that come out, other than the nuns, of course, are the usual women. There's no difference in how women talk and behave. So the first works that come out are women dissing their husbands, talking about their mothers-in-law and how terrible they are and how badly treated they are, household drudgery, how much they have to walk for water, how much they have to cook, and sexual slavery, and this entire angst that they have actually repressed and held within them for many centuries. Women sang these songs while they cut paddy, as they do in Tamil Nadu even today. It's also how they wrote in a way, because they created those verses as they worked.
निहुरी डंडा टूटी रे बुद्धि भला कति कान छुटी निहुरी डंडा
वेद हाकारे पुराणे गर्जती स्त्रियेच्या संगती हित नो हे मी तो सहज स्त्रियेचाची देह परमार्थाची सोय आता कैची.
Bhakti again is an expression of freedom, of seeking one's own personal idea of God. It actually broke the caste barriers, that you didn't need to have a purohit, you didn't have to have a Brahmin, I didn't have to pay him money. The Bhakti movement saw a lot of women, because being in the house, I could seek, there was freedom to seek divinity.
I think there is definitely a difference between the women poets, the mystic poets and the men. This I have certainly, you pick it up. Each of them are quite individual, obviously. The timbers are very different, but there is definitely a difference. And to my mind, it's, for instance, just the abandon of Meera. I don't think any other poet comes close to that. That kind of ecstatic abandon. Or the capacity for despair. So despair and union, those extremes, the kind of voltage of Meera, no one comes close to.
Across India, she's very well known. Without knowing it, we often have her language on our tongue. Even today, you will find verses in Rajasthan which tell you very clearly that she's a disgrace, a stain upon the community. You think of her, she's someone who, from a very early age, knew her mind. She was forced to get married, it would appear. This is the story that we are all told. And there are other kinds of myths that float around. But once she decides in her mind, I'm talking about this mythological one, Meera, then she is completely focused on Sri Krishna or the love of her life. So when you mention the word determined, how else can you justify what she's doing, excepting that she is one hell of a determined woman? And the saddest part is that we have forgotten that she's a rebel.
It used to rain pearls. The fresh waters used to gush through the fields. The fields watered thus would rustle with chamba grain. Of all this wealth of fields and grain, I was the mistress. Then my lord was taken away from me a short while ago. And now, for a fistful of rice, I am famine stricken. The 19th century sort of privileged the women's question over every other question. So, in some way, I think the 19th century man began to feel the oppressiveness of that system because there were widows in everybody's family.
मैंने अपने घर देखा है, मेरी माँ 22 साल की विधवा हुई गांव में, है अंग्रेज़ों का राज था। मेरी माँ ने कहा अपने ससुर से कि दादाजी मैं पढ़ना चाहती हूँ। गांव से स्कूल था कई कोस दूर और वहाँ जाऊँगी पढ़ने। तो मेरे बाबा ने तो मना नहीं किया, बल्कि उनका मजाक उड़ाया गया पूरे समाज में बाबा का कि इनकी बहू पढ़ने जाती है। माताजी को कहा गया पागल औरत पढ़ने जाती है।
First serious account is actually Pandita Ramabai's High Caste Hindu Woman and Tarabai Shinde's polemic on Stri Purush Tulna, in which actually the widow is the trigger for her writing. So actually the print revolution gives women the capacity to enter the public sphere on their own terms. You push yourself into the public sphere at a moment when the public sphere is not actually willing to include you. So there's this big debate around the age of marriage and the age of consent being raised. And there's Dayaram Gidumal in Western India who sends out a questionnaire to everybody. He doesn't send a single questionnaire to a woman. The reform is about women. No woman is allowed to enter the debate. So it's quite extraordinary. So at that time, people write letters to the newspaper. That's one way they get into the public sphere. From the 30s onwards, there are literary movements and women are very much a part of it. So there's Rashid Jahan, for instance, there's Qurratul Haider, there's Ismat Chughtai.
So for a long time, women wrote in the male voice. Earlier, when men wrote about women, it was, showing their weakness and they're all very, how they have to be looked after and rescued and so on. All the fairy stories are about that. But when people like Rashid Jahan all started writing, then they were very combative women and who stood up and said what's what and so on. People like Ismat Chughtai and all were writing in a feminine, and people held that against her in the beginning, that she was only writing about the world of women, and they thought it was not a big enough project for her to be considered a major writer.
Qurratul Haider, is a cult figure in Urdu literature. Of course, with her arc Qadariya, she became an international figure. She talks about singers of Lucknow, she talks about art, she talks about temples, she talks about mosques, she talks about dancing girls. If you've read Arc Qadariya, it talks, there are characters in Arc Qadariya belong to the Hindu tradition, the old Hindu tradition, the old Buddhist tradition, Islam and Christianity. In a way, they represented the Indian culture. The book culminates, this novel culminates at partition. And this pain which the writer has been living, this nausea, comes through this Arc Qadariya.
ਅੱਜ ਆਖਾਂ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੋਂ ਕਬਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬੋਲ ਅੱਜ ਕਿਤਾਬੇ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਅਗਲਾ ਵਰਕਾ ਫੋਲ ਆਖਾਂ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਤੋਂ ਕਬਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬੋਲ ਅੱਜ ਕਿਤਾਬੇ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਅਗਲਾ ਵਰਕਾ ਫੋਲ
I mean, it's now clear that the rape and abduction of women happened on a mass scale. We know from statistics of different organizations that at least 100,000 women were abducted, possibly raped, impregnated by men of the other religion, sometimes raped by men of their own religion because they don't magically become better at moments like this. And many were killed by their own families in order to ostensibly save them from possible rape. These histories were not talked about much, partly because I think for the men of the different communities, the rape of their women, within quotes, is seen as a kind of failure on their part to protect their women. Then this is really the dark side of independence. Violence was not the only thing that happened to women at partition. You know, there were so many ways in which their lives changed. In fact, one of the women I talked to even said, you know, it was a moment when I spread my wings.
Immediately after independence, I mean, we grew up in those decades after independence. The main advice to women was to really be good mothers and good women citizens. And one of the ways of being good women citizens was to take care of the house. And many of us protested against that. We felt that now that the women have come out, why should they go back into the house? Under what circumstances does a woman start writing? Like sometime back, I was abroad and somebody on the stage asked me that a male writer had come from India some time back, and they had asked him, how do stories come to you? And he said that I wake up every morning and I open the window and stories come flying to me like birds, you know. So they asked me, what do you think about it? I told them it's a wonderful metaphor to say that stories come like birds flying. I said, but the thing is that one should have a window to open. That's one thing. Another thing is that the family must allow the women to stand by the window, open it, and wait for these stories to come.
कानते कानते छवा सुतिरे बुति भला कति कान छुटी कानते कानते छवा सुतिरे बुति भला कति कान छुटी मुर्गा के बाएंगे सोनी खटिया से उठ गली मुर्गा के बाएंगे सोनी खटिया से उठ गली ढेक से धान कुटी कुटाते कूटते घोड़ा।
क्या होता है गांव में कि जिस घर में पुरुष नहीं होता उसकी ज़मीन को हड़पने को आ जाते हैं बहुत लोग। स्त्री होती है खाली तो उससे कहते हैं कि तुझसे हम शादी कर लेंगे, और वो जान जाते हैं जब ये आ जाएगी तो ज़मीन साथ आएगी। और स्त्री जो है शादी की इतनी वो होती है, बेचारी को इतना परेशान कर दिया जाता है। बिना शादीशुदा स्त्री जो होती है, विधवा हो जाए या अपरित्यक्ता हो, उसके लिए मुश्किल हो जाती है। तो वो सब पूरी कहानी मैंने इदन नमम करके, इदन नमम मीन्स कि ये मेरा नहीं है, ये मेरे लिए नहीं है ना। इदन नमम से भी पहले मैं कबूतराओं पे लिखना चाहती थी। वहाँ कबूतरियाँ जो हैं उन पे क्या, उनके पास कोई खेती नहीं है, कबूतराओं के पास कोई नौकरी नहीं देता उन्हें, कोई जो मजदूरी है वो नहीं कि नहीं तुम चोर हो। कबूतरे तो ज़्यादातर जंगल में रहेंगे, जेल में, और कबूतरियाँ